Plans to scrap no-fault evictions in England have been unveiled today as part of a long-promised shake-up of the rental market. Housing campaigners say the government's renters reform bill is a huge opportunity to improve the lives of millions of tenants. Well, the bill will ban no-fault evictions, where landlords give no reason for taking back possession of their property. It will also make it illegal for landlords and agents to impose bans on benefit claimants or families with children. However, it would make it easier for landlords to evict tenants for antisocial behaviour and for missing rental payments. Renters will also be given a legal right to request a pet in their home, which landlords must then consider and cannot unreasonably refuse. Well, to discuss this shake-up of the rental sector, we're joined by author and journalist and lifelong renter Catherine Ormerod, at the moment a private tenant herself, and Ben Beadle, Chief Executive of the National Residential Landlords Association. Welcome to you both. And Catherine, I'll come to you first, if I may. You've been renting since you were 18. You're a mum of two, your young family renting at the moment. What in this announcement today made you feel better about your circumstances renting? Because it can be quite precarious for tenants at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I think it's great that we're having a conversation full stop about renters. We are now such a burgeoning and huge sector of the housing market. There are so many more of us than there were. Even in 2000, we're talking an above 100,000% increase. We've gone from 2 million private renters in the UK to 4.61 million renters in the last, research that's come out. So we're this massive section of society, particularly between the ages of 35 and 44. So in general, I felt this is great that we're getting some level of ministerial attention. However, there are definitely some issues that I feel with several of the proposals in the bill. And also, I feel very, very strongly that it kind of isn't getting to the root of the issue for most of us. And the root of the issue for most of us is the cost of rent.
Yeah, we'll come on to that in just a minute. I'll just bring Ben in to talk about it from a landlord's perspective, because there was a lot announced today that will help protect renters, and we'll get into that with Catherine as to how effective some of that will be. But in terms of what's in it for landlords, how will landlords, particularly private landlords, be feeling today?
Well, I think they would be looking at the bill with some trepidation. As you rightly say, this is a renters reform bill. It's not got giveaways in there for landlords. However, the Secretary of State has spoken very forcefully about the need for responsible landlords to be able to take action against antisocial tenants, rent arrears, wishing to move back into their property or selling it. And it's really, really important that the Secretary of State delivers on that, because like us or loathe us, we do need to have confidence in these reforms. It is very, very important. Otherwise, the cost of living challenges will go on. We simply won't have the right number of homes available for people to live in, and that's a problem for everybody.
When it comes to landlords, they get a bit of a bad rap. Michael Gove was at pains to point out today that it is a minority of landlords that they're trying to protect renters from with this bill. In the main, landlords are responsible. Do you think that this reflects that, or is it actually going to be more prohibitive for landlords? Because obviously there's this end no-fault evictions, which landlords have spoken before about the sort of difficulty in moving tenants on if they aren't paying their rent or if they are antisocial.
Yeah, I think, I would sort of challenge the sort of no-fault element. We're very much of the view that as responsible landlords, why on earth would we be asking a good tenant to move on if they were paying their rent and looking after the property? We don't evict people just for the fun of it. It's a pain for everybody that's concerned. So for us, it's about making sure that those rogue tenants and those people that aren't paying or looking after the property or causing misery to neighbours can be dealt with efficiently in the new world. And it's very important that landlords have the confidence to be able to do that.
Catherine, I just want to get your point of view because, you know, as you said, you've been renting for a long time and you as an individual and you as a family have moved to several different properties. And it was pointed out by the London Renters Union that, you know, this bill is long overdue and the fact that, you know, no-fault evictions are going to be, you know, got rid of. Landlords still have the power to force out tenants for other means, and that is hiking up the rent, for example, or saying that they need the property back for family issues. So renters aren't totally protected here.
Absolutely not. And I don't really see the difference between the insane hikes in rent that I've personally experienced and a no-fault eviction. The last property I was in, at the end of our tenancy, the landlord decided to increase the rent by 66%. Now, I'm not sure who's sitting around with an extra 66% of money in their kitty, because certainly I wasn't. So, of course, I had to leave the property. We have no protection in this country for huge rent hikes. And, you know, the recent information out of Hamptons is that since the pandemic, on average, all renters are paying 25% more rent than they were before the pandemic. And that is catastrophic for people's situations financially, especially in the cost of living crisis. There's nothing about protections against those rental hikes within this bill. Moreover, there's no conversation about building enough houses so we don't have the supply and demand issue within our country, which obviously is besetting all elements of the housing market, from buying, from renting. You know, for me, it's a ploy. It's a complete obfuscation of a really, really difficult situation for everyone. It doesn't really solve the problems that it's pretending that it does.
Yeah, Catherine, we're going to have a discussion about housing and the lack of affordable housing in particular a little later on in the programme. We might get you back on for that, actually. It is something we are going to be discussing. But, Ben, I just want to give you a chance to come back on what Catherine said. I mean, you know, she and her family had to move because the landlord asked for a 66% increase in the rent, and I can't see anything, you know, in these new reforms that would stop that from happening.
You're absolutely right. There's nothing in the reforms that will stop that from happening. That's because tenants can already challenge unfair rent increases through the first tier tribunal. What the measures announced today require is that there's only one increase a year. That's subject to a 2-month notice period. But there's long been precedent for the first tier tribunal to deal with unfair rent increases. So I would agree, 66% sounds like a whopping great increase, and it would be absolutely ripe and correct for the first tier tribunal to investigate that case. And the first tier tribunal does have the power to downgrade rent increases.
Okay,
so before we...
OK, yeah, so there is a measure in place. Catherine, did you go down that route, just out of interest? I saw you shaking your head when Ben was talking about that tribunal process you could go through.
The reality is how does that actually work? You've got a kid in school, you've got to make all of these plans, you're being served notice, you've got 2 months and you're being asked to pay X amount of extra money, and they're saying that they won't renew, you know, your contract. Are you going to go through a tribunal process? What's the speed that that's going to turn around? Our criminal justice system, all of our systems in this country, we know where they're at with backlogs. The reality is, for the vast amount of people, and I am absolutely not the only person that has gone through this level of rental increase. This is not some random niche, strange scenario. This is something that so many of my peers are dealing with. The reality is it's not going to actually in practice be enforceable because you have to move, you have to find accommodation. It's not like I could just step back from this property, go and live with my family, like my parents, and come back to it. You have to find a roof over your head. And until we're in a situation where it is illegal to do that, people will continue to abuse the system and get what they possibly can. And that is the problem, really, for so many of us. I think especially in London, you know, the last time when we had to move out of our property, I put 11 offers in, and each and every one I was outbid by other people. The supply and demand situation with rental in London is astronomically challenging for families at the moment. And that is really what we need to deal with from a governmental point of view.
OK, Ben, we're just running out of time, so I'll give you the chance to come back on that. What Catherine's saying is that, yes, there are these due processes that you can go through, but the reality is people's lives. They have to be able to plan. They haven't got the time, and in some cases the resources to be able to jump through those hoops.
Yeah, well, two quick things. I mean, I absolutely agree with Catherine. We do need investment in making sure that these processes actually work, and that's both in terms of the first-tier tribunal, but also in terms of court reform that's absolutely on its knees. I 100% agree with that, because if these measures come in and the court systems and the supporting systems aren't ready, they will fail. There's no question about that. The other thing I would say is, Catherine is absolutely right. We have a shocking demand and supply imbalance. We don't have the right number of homes available in the right places, and that's because landlords have been kicked from pillar to post by this government for the last 10 years. So we need to see reverses to tax changes, and we need to see pro-growth measures that bring the supply that this country desperately needs, and that will bring rents down.
Ben Beadle, Chief Executive of the National Residential Landlords Association, and Catherine Ormerod, author and journalist. Thank you so much for your contribution this afternoon. Good to speak to you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now.